1,000 residents in the city. They had been shutting off water for years, but nowhere on this scale.
Welcome, beloved community. We are back again with yet another installment of the People's Water Board Coalition's Water Wednesday. As always, I am here with my beloved co-host, Valerie Jean.
Hi, everyone.
And we cannot forget our behind-the-scenes tech guru extraordinaire, Miss Angelica, who keeps us running smoothly and consistently week after week. Today, people, we're hopefully giving you a very informative show. Many of our viewers, depending on their age, may have already heard of what we're going to be talking about today. I don't know how in detail it is, but we have Mr. Eric Epstein here with us today. He is a nuclear watchdog. He's been doing this for over 40 years, and he is with the Susquehanna Valley Alliance and the 3 Mile Island Alert. I know that rung a bell for some of our viewers, 3 Mile Island. I was young, but I remember hearing about it in the news, and I'm sure many of you have. And today he's here to talk about some of the plants that are along the river, including the Susquehanna, the 3 Mile Island, and the Peach Bottom plant. Thank you so much for being here today, Eric. We really appreciate you coming on to talk about this. And it's something that a lot of people may have forgotten, but it's still very, very imperatively relevant.
That's right.
Well, yeah, I think, 3 Mile Island was an iconic moment in history and for America. It happened at a time when the country really wasn't feeling good about itself. Atomic power, nuclear energy was supposed to wean us off of dependence on Arab oil embargo, although that never made sense because nuclear power doesn't power automobiles. At any rate, 3 Mile Island is actually a little less than 3 miles. It's on the Susquehanna River, difficult name to pronounce. The river hosts 3 nuclear plants. So Peach Bottom, which is to the south on the Maryland and York border, has units 1, 2, and 3. Unit 1 is dead, and it's too radioactive to contaminate. As you move up the river and get to 3 Mile Island, you have Unit 2, which was involved with the accident. And people need to understand it's an accident without an ending. There hasn't been a human entry in the basement in over 46 years. That's probably not getting cleaned up. The one they want to restart next to it is TMI 1, which has signed a contract with Microsoft. And then as you move to the north into the coal region, Susquehanna Units 1 and 2 have signed an agreement with Amazon.com. So the river's gorgeous, but it's also populated with nuclear plants, coal plants, and also Marcellus shale fuel plants. So what we've been trying to do and where we've litigated, not only say exclusively, but what we focused on, our work is at the Susquehanna River Basin Commission. That controls and monitors surface water and consumptive use. So the SRBC is a federal compact. It's New York, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and the Army Corps of Engineers. That's where I think the biggest battle will occur. That's where the biggest battle will occur because it's going to occur on 2 fronts. People have no idea how much water data centers use, and they have no idea how much water nuclear plants use. For example, Susquehanna to the north uses 74 million gallons a day. Amazon came in front of us and said, well, we need 60,000. There's no way. So they're getting water from elsewhere. They found public water to help cool their data centers. They want to build up to 15 data centers. So what this means in terms of water use and price is that they have a contract with Amazon. It's behind the meter, which means they wouldn't pay transmission and distribution charges. That's being appealed. But if they're successful and if they move forward, they'll take up to 1,000 megawatts off the grid. So it actually impacts the grid in a negative way. Nuclear power is not 100%. It has to shut down to refuel every 2 years. A number of the plants are burping and belching and doing all different kinds of things. So that was the data center nuclear marriage that first hit us, which we litigated. TMI is just going to be a 15-round drag-out match. Most people think it's a fait accompli. Susquehanna to the north came online on 84. TMI 1, the plant they want to restart, came online in 74. And like the other two zombie plants, Palisades and Arnold, they're small. So
Zombie plants.
they're only about 835 megawatts. So what's happening in each case where the data centers and nuclear plants are being married, they're signing an exclusivity contract. So the people around the plant get the risk, but the reward goes somewhere else. And fundamentally, and we haven't had this public policy decision, we have to ask ourselves, are we going to prioritize water for humans, for farming, or are we going to prioritize it for inanimate objects? And so as you go down the river, Peach Bottom hasn't married yet. And that plant came online in 74. So you have plants from 84, 74, 74. You're restarting dinosaurs. 3 Mile Island came online in 74. So did the Ford Pinto, but we're not going around making more Ford Pintos. Is this, regardless of you're anti or pro nuclear, the two issues that abound are, is this how we want to invest our money? And is this how we want to use our water? I mean, when you use it, I mean, TMI is going to ask for 50 million gallons. On any given day in the Susquehanna, TMI and Peach Bottom take half the river's flow. It's coming back at a different temperature, coming out with chemicals.
It actually like evaporates into the air and is never put back into the water table with the data centers, right? That's the way that I understand it.
I mean, even if it is it's not safe.
Well, here's the problem. You know, you look at this billowing clouds, and, you know, growing up, we were always taught this is a great thing, and, you know, everybody welcomed the nuclear plant to the area, and then they melted it down. And people need to understand temperatures were well above 5,000 degrees. If you look at the fuel, and we finally looked at it, it looked like nuclear nachos. So they are still cleaning that up. I doubt, because the building's contaminated, I don't see that ever being cleaned up, which begs the other question directly related to water. 3 Mile Island is a nuclear power plant. That land, that used to be the Longnecker farm. It flooded, and they used to farm watermelons there. So you put a nuclear power plant on an island that floods, that empties into the Chesapeake Bay, which is the most productive estuary in North America. So to top it off, TMI-2 not cleaning up, it's now a high-level radioactive waste site. TMI-1, which they want to restore, has 700 metric tons of waste. So there's going to be gobs of more waste put there, but the question is, who in their right mind builds a radioactive waste site on an island in the middle of a river? So yeah, this story's not good here, but I would say this: people, there's this twisted, bizarre love affair with nuclear, because I think Americans like a Hollywood ending. This ain't a Hollywood ending. This is John Wayne riding a horse backwards into the wrong century. This is the absolute wrong thing to do. Water's precious. It shouldn't be a subsidy for nuclear. Let's have the discussion. And a lot of people don't realize TMI is in 2 counties, Dauphin, and then the southern tip is in Lancaster. Very rich farmland. Lancaster is the most productive non-irrigated county in the country. You're playing with fire here. And something that nobody talks about is we have a large population of Amish and Old Order Mennonite. Very hard to communicate with them in the event of an accident, and they, you know, the animals will stay behind. So it's kind of getting off point, but it is a really dangerous elixir America's drinking right now.
You know, the first meltdown, those people were very harmed. And the movie that you were in, the Netflix movie, we're going to put that in the description down below for people to watch. But we saw like a river full of dead fish, right? But there was a lot done to the people in the environment. Can you touch on that a little bit?
So the accident was a loss of coolant accident, you know, mechanical error, human error. They didn't recognize that the core was being uncovered. The accident really, I mean, the intense part was for about 5 days. You know, the company came out, they only had one press conference. They purposely misled the governor and the folks. So it was abnormally warm. March 28th was the accident. 2 days later on Friday, the governor and Joseph Henry, who was chairman of the NRC, had a discussion. And one gentleman said to the other, we're like 2 blind men in a cave looking for a flashlight.
Right.
So they have a recommended evacuation for preschool children within 5 miles of the plant. About 145,000 people evacuated. There was no 24/7 news. Everybody had a landline, so the gas stations were clogged, the groceries were clogged, the banks were out of money. And, you know, oddly enough, 11 days before the accident, the China syndrome was released. So that was the frame of reference for most folks. And they have a line in the China syndrome where they said if the accident got more severe, we could have lost a land the size of Pennsylvania. And everybody in the audience was creeped out as they should be. So you have two different things to respond to. What we know on the ground that what happened to people. Now, the industry says nobody was harmed, but I think we have proven convincingly people were harmed. Every major study has indicated increased cancer. Industry is unwilling to link it. So the first thing you look at are the farm animals. This is the farming communities, a lot of deformities, stillborns, which are basically a predicate for what's happened next. Dr. McLeod, who was head of the Department of Health, called out to the fact that there was increased fatalities in newborns. He was fired. He was terminated. So in 85, a study
Cover it up.
yeah, 85 study came out, which was really a survey that said nobody was harmed. It was poorly designed and it was ridiculed by epidemiologists at Harvard and Penn State. To distill this into what we know, we did 5 door-to-door surveys, citizens. And what we did, which was different, is rather than go in a circle that was a nice, cute circle around the plant, we went where the radiation was. So there were 17 plumes, and the only people we really asked were people who lived in the plume. And
Right.
we send you a map. Dr. Wing then did a map, and the amount of cancer just exploded. So if you don't look, you don't find. The industry's never going to acknowledge the physical health effects. To this day, Hershey Medical is on its 3rd thyroid study, and they proved strongly that TMI was linked to thyroid cancer. The other issue was psychological stress, which every study
That's
found.
Absolutely.
You have one childhood and it follows you around the rest of your life. You've got one meltdown and you can never escape that. So you're
Mhm.
kind of boxed in. So the harms, I think, are clear and convincing. The Japanese couple came here, and based on the tragedy that occurred in Japan with mercury poisoning, they were concerned about TMI. So it was interesting. It was revealing. It was painful.
I know you touched on like the increased incidence of cancer in that area, but from the community perspective, and also how did this affect like their drinking water?
So we actually had a community psychology department at Penn State Harrisburg, which is maybe 3 or 4 miles from the plant. There's a woman named Sandra Prince Embry. She did a lot of studies on this. So we did something that had never been done. There were 7 groups. The group in Middletown, near where the plant is, People Against Nuclear Energy, argued that the nuclear power plant that was shut down during the accident, TMI-1, would cause psychological stress that needed to be considered before reopening the plant. And we won until we got to the highest court in Pennsylvania, and that we lost. It was a psych stress case. So yeah, it's hard to quantify, but if you look at the studies, that without really any dissent is the reality. On the health effects, we did 5 surveys at different community groups, 5 different surveys. We found that, I don't want to say all, but most people had metallic taste in their mouth, sunburn, eye irritation, loss of hair, vomiting, diarrhea, a metallic taste.
Some of
So
the major symptoms that come from radiation poisoning.
yeah. And then look, there's a survivors of TMI website that has, I think, 3 or 4,000 folks on it. But I think it was 93 where the judge Rambo threw out our case, the health cases. So we were going to have
Horrible.
in which each form of cancer was put on trial. That was yanked. And the other problem we had is that the radiation levels for exposure were distorted by the company and the industry. So we
Of
had
course.
we had to accept these artificially, ridiculously low standards.
Mhm.
We're talking about an accident 46 years ago as a freshman in college, and actually, I was in California. So what scarred me more, and you may remember this, was the mass suicide in Guyana,
Yeah.
Jonestown, because we had people from our college, Chapman College. It was like a peace college there. So, it was kind of engulfed by that. TMI hit. And let me put it to you a different way. Maybe people will understand this. Our area, our community is a place where people came to. We were a destination site. You came here for Hershey chocolate. You came here to visit the Amish. And you came here to visit the Gettysburg National Park. So we were used to being a place that you wanted to come to. After the
Tourist attraction.
Right. After the accident, we were ridiculed. Jokes on SNL being dismissed. So people need to understand you were within 30 minutes of losing Gettysburg and the Amish and Hershey. So, the impacts are always hard to quantify.
Yeah.
Economically, we took a beating. Health-wise, we took a beating, but we're resilient. We're still here, and we're still fighting.
Thank goodness that so many folks came together and are still to this day giving the history of it. I'll tell you, I didn't understand it until I listened to some of the testimony of the people who had been there and experienced it. And the children, I think that you're right when it comes to those psychological things or the mental strife and the mental struggle that you have for the rest of your life after you've gone through something like that. We talk about that a lot. The water struggle here, we had mass water shutoffs where the whole neighborhoods were shut off, and the struggle for people to bounce back mentally, and years later for children still have to go to therapy because they couldn't wash clothes or take a shower or brush their teeth before
It's
they went.
classic PTSD.
Yeah, and it's
You
the
know,
same
I'll put
thing.
something out for you so Patty Longnecker is a former good friend in Elizabethtown. And her child, who has since passed away, he was, I believe, in his 50s, Bradley, they have a farm. And so they were confronted with the decision which animals to leave behind. And farmers have an attachment to animals. And that's people been fishing TMI forever. What you need to understand, 3 Mile Island was part of a vision, and it was called the Frederick TMI, where 3 Mile Island's at, is pretty shallow, very wide. It's dammed. So it's good for water skiing, for fishing, for boating. In that area is a coal plant, a nuclear plant, and a hydro plant.
Oh, wow.
So this was the vision for the future.
A triple threat.
Yeah, so they're all shut down right now, but TMI 1 is the one that, they want to resuscitate from the dead.
Microsoft.
Yeah.
And that's how, how we actually can show all of our water struggles are extremely connected all the way around the country, but and around the world, because those are the problems that people from Taiwan are having right now, these huge data centers, right? Those are in China right now, these huge data centers to be able to manage their things, all these other things that use up ungodly amounts of water. And there's no way for us to understand, it's no way for us to understand fully what the impact is going to be 10 years from now after all these centers have been created. And also the precious metals and everything that goes in every step of the way of building these centers and getting them online.
It's very extractive.
Water, yes, it uses up huge amounts of water, just making the computers and the batteries and all these other things. I don't think that people understand that you're talking about empty rivers, right?
Well,
all these things, right? Like not
So-
having drinking.
There's a couple things we should tease out. Number one is people have become zealously pro-nuclear and have absolutely forgotten the impact on water. So when we have the conversation they just, it really uses that much water. It's like, yeah, a typical data center uses the same amount of water as Frederick, Maryland. You're taking that out and you're not returning it. And be honest with you, we're not sure of the chemicals that are being discharged from the data center. It's really kind of secret, cloak and dagger kind of stuff. So I think that people are and it's a good thing they're aware of climate change. I get it. We got to do something. But, do you have the right to auction off your children's future for your immediate need?
Exactly.
The moral question is this. Before we were deregulated, I used to litigate electric cases where they would raise the rates. And one of the principles we operated off was used and useful. Was that plant used and useful for a ratepayer? If it was, then you were tithed the amount of money needed to clean up a plant. This is the first time where people that haven't been born are going to have to pay to clean up a plant, are going to have to pay to find a way to conserve water. Now, one thing we're doing, and this is where the battle's going to be at 3 Mile Island, is the Susquehanna River Basin Commission has endorsed the policy of dry cooling. You can dry these plants without water. The nuclear industry has opposed it. Ironically, the gas industry has embraced it. In my mind, when you litigate or come to the table, you have to come with more than an appetite. Here's your options. If you choose to go down that way, one way, the wrong way, and you come into a collision with another force, nothing I can do for you. But in my mind, and it's why I really look forward to being on the show, water has been the paramount issue. And when you look at nuclear power, there's 3 W's. Water, where's the water going to come from? Waste, where's the waste going to go? And Wall Street. Why has Wall Street never invested in nuclear? So when you solve those riddles, then we can have a discussion about nuclear.
Yeah, we got to be truthful about it first. We have to understand that put it all on the table to talk about it.
Well, that seems to be an issue with the elitist corporations and companies. Is transparency is a word that's not in their vocabulary.
Well, that's why they're being secretive, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The laws have been so relaxed, and this is even pre-Trump environmentally, that we're on our heels. The Chevron doctrine is gone.
Yes.
This is the worst. The only way the Supreme Court could be worse is if they appointed Darth Vader as the
Right.
That might be an improvement.
Yeah, it could be an improvement. So, I mean, when you litigate in the NRC, it's a tough gig. You're going to lose. It's pro-nuclear. You can rarely appeal outside to federal court because they'll say, look, we don't have the requisite competence to understand these issues. But a lot of these issues aren't nuclear. I mean, water in nuclear has been really just recently people paying attention to it. And, by looking at the temperature at discharge, by looking at the fish kills, CMI uses something called clamtrol, which is a chemical to kill invasive species. This all goes back to the same place.
Right.
And, as we said back in '79, we all lived downriver from something.
That's right.
Amen.
It was just recently an oil spill here in the St. Clair Shore River, and it was just we're all downhill from it. Even if it took us a couple days, took it a couple days to reach us, it did, and it would.
Yeah.
But people were like, "Oh no, drinking water's fine, whatever." But they're always, they never tell us the truth. That's why we have to be those agents. We're the only ones who are going to be able to come up with that truth as best as possible and share it with each other because they never do.
We need to understand the moment in time we live in where the average American has an attention span of a fruit fly. And if it doesn't happen within 24 hours or 48 hours, it doesn't have an impact. So you look at a country that's passive, it's a consumer-based economy. How those products are manufactured, people don't seem to care unless it impacts them directly. So with the water issue, it impacts directly when you have to conserve or you're without water, but it shouldn't have to come to that. And I think we're at a critical juncture. I think water has been taken for granted, and I think a lot of environmentalists should take a hit on that because they look at atmospheric releases at the consciousness. I think we're all basically swimming up the same stream.
That's right.
We
That's
are.
right.
And
And-
because of water, we are all connected.
That's one thing that connects us all, and it's on us to protect it because certainly not the government and certainly not the corporations. They're just not going to. As a matter of fact, they're going to do the absolute opposite of that,
Well,
right?
We have an environmental amendment enshrined in our Constitution, and water in public waterways is owned by the state. So that gives us, we're a unique state. We're in the East, and we have two federal compacts, Delaware River Basin Commission, which has banned fracking. And they're in New York, New Jersey, and Delaware. We're the Susquehanna River Basin Commission. So these compacts provide an opportunity to impact how water is used. The problem is this: they don't and they won't talk about how water is disposed. So you have to get a license to use water, which makes sense, and you have to operate under certain parameters. Total lack of organization when it comes out to what the coal plant, nuclear plant, gas plant is putting in the river. That's enough.
Intentional.
Yeah. And, we're overregulated. Horse hockey, you're not overregulated.
Yeah.
You just want to make more money by not doing. So a lot of people in America still subscribe to the notion dilution is a solution to water pollution. Doesn't work like that.
No, it doesn't. And it's so precious. I mean, we can go without electricity. We absolutely cannot live without water.
Right.
And we did for most of human existence. Lived without electricity, as hard and as difficult as that is and sounds to people, but water's so precious. Before we wrap up, Eric, first of all, thank you for your dedicating your life to this work and overwhelmingly being really the expert on it. I feel very grateful to have you here to talk to our listeners about this. And next week, we're going to be talking to your friend Kevin Camps about the Palisades stuff, the stuff that's going on there. So we're going to keep folks abreast of all of this. Do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up? Something that we didn't touch on quite yet?
Yeah, I have three final thoughts. People need to understand 3 Mile Island is an accident without an ending. so that the accident isn't over, the plant won't be cleaned up. You may be able to put it in your back of your mind, but it's in the forefront of our mind. Secondly, radiation time is different than human time. And so people have made a Faustian bargain with the devil. You can get electricity for the moment, but you have radioactive waste forever. Who
Absolutely.
empowered us to condemn future generations to babysit our waste product? I happen to believe that future generations will view us as environmental Philistines. And third, history absolutely repeats itself. Maybe on another channel, a different hue, but it repeats itself. So don't believe, that things can't reoccur. I'll end with this. I think TMI is more likely to operate than not operate. And I think lightning can strike twice in the same place. So,
Yeah.
yeah, look, we have a website. We'll keep you posted. I will send whatever the email is. I'll send the attachments to them.
Great.
Anything else you need. And thanks for being patient with me. I'm just getting out of the 8-track phase and into the cassette phase. So I'm a couple technologies behind.
Please share this with folks, have these conversations with your family. And until next time, try to stay afloat. Bye.
Bye.